So if you think about how many different forms of parasites there are biologically, there are some that just like do this quick flyby, you know, like a mosquito, grab your blood and then fly off. There are others that might live in your gut. There are some that serve useful purposes. And because parasites, from a sufficiently large evolutionary vantage, are symbionts. They have an evolutionary necessity. In fact, this is a little bit of a side, but I'll come back to your question momentarily. There's the Red Queen hypothesis that some Oxford biologists came up with, and it comes from a reference in Alice in Wonderland where the Red Queen says to Alice, you know, here, my dear, you see, you have to run as fast as you can just to stay in one place. It's believed by the creators of the Red Queen hypothesis that sexual differentiation as compared to asexual reproduction came about as a consequence of parasitism. That because host organisms were outnumbered by parasites and the parasites themselves were so well evolved and adapted, the only way to stay ahead of them genetically was to have the greater genetic novelty of sexual reproduction. So one thing to kind of get out of our mental frame is a kind of too simplistic duality where like the parasites are just evil, they shouldn't exist, and so forth. They may be part of some cosmic order that we may not be able to fully comprehend. Now, let's see, your question was about what level of reality do they come from?
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that they come from various levels of reality. So in some cases, the mind parasite could be something that you could videotape, for example, in the form in that some mind parasites are cultural memes. Like, for example, if I'm walking by and I see an ad poster, like one I once saw that says, "Aren't you hungry for Burger King now?" Question mark.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a kind of mind parasite. It's a different question than saying like, "Are you hungry for Burger King now?" Or, you know, it's trying to plant a suggestion in my mind, a mind parasite that like, oh, you probably are hungry for Burger King now. You should go and eat this unhealthy food and feed the host, the corporation, by doing so. Here's another example of a fully visible and like completely conventional mind parasite as a cultural meme. I give this example in the essay. You know, let's say you have a very sensitive adolescent boy and he falls deeply in love with another adolescent girl, and in typical high school fashion or whatever, she cheats on him, or he thinks that she cheated on him, and he feels very confused and upset and heartbroken. And now his friend in the locker room says, can I use curse words to illustrate this, or would you rather I
Mm-hmm.
didn't?
Yeah. No, go for
Okay.
it. Yeah.
So let's say the other boy says, "Well, that's just the way. That's just the way bitches are. So you just gotta fuck him and forget him."
Mm-hmm.
And in that moment of confusion and vulnerability, this boy takes on this potent mind parasite and reframes his whole eros to be that of a predator and uncaring and so forth, and that may destroy his whole soul. And the mind parasite was communicated with a single sentence.
Mm-hmm.
But then you may have mind parasites who are more like intelligent on the other end of the pole, who would be intelligent, autonomous beings. And this would be closer to mind parasites as envisioned by the Gnostics, what they called archons, and would even have a leader called the demiurge, where you'd have these intelligent and manipulative and maybe even, you know, more evolved and intelligent than us, super mind parasites that can almost be like deities or whatever, you know, or you have like people's ideas, and I think that they're probably more likely to be true as metaphors than actualities, but I can't be 100% sure, like the reptilians, where people imagine or, you know, claim that there are extraterrestrial species that manipulating human beings that are parasitic or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have other middle grade possibilities where you have things that cannot be seen by the conventional senses, but are not necessarily fully conscious, but more analogous to microbial mind parasites. So this is the perspective, for example, of Dr. Carl Sagan of the Claire Vision School, and I wrote a book called that I review on my website called, Parasites of the Energetic Field or something like that, or Entities of the Energetic Field, and where he believes that these are sort of fragments, astral fragments left over by the human dead. And so like a really bad place to so that there's sort of like parts of the human energy field that are of a denser but still astral matter that's left behind when the rest of the spirit moves on. So things like, and they tend to be darker things like unresolved appetites and negative human emotions. So from the Sagan perspective, a really dangerous place to catch such mind parasites as he conceives of them would be, say, a battlefield, like where my dad was on D-Day, and he ended up with, decades of what we now call PTSD after that experience. Because what would you have if you were a survivor of a horrible battlefield situation like that? Well, you'd have young men with lots of interrupted will to live, in terror and in pain, leaving their bodies. And my dad was a medic, so he would have been caring for these people or attempting to while they were dying and so forth. And therefore, these astral fragments, according to Dr. Sagan, would attach to a still living person to be an energy source for them. But that these parasites, and it seems like the other energy parasites too, have a preference for negative emotions and darker forms of human sexual energy, for example, as their preferred food. And so if you think about it, it's as if, I know this is going a little bit off the answer to your subject, but it's an interesting aside. If you think about it, if these organisms were more evolved, like in the way a saint might be, or who has become, say, a breatharian, at least according to claims, where they're living off of pure chi. These, and I think we live off of both chi and caloric energy, and that ratio can shift based on what you eat and who you are and how evolved you are. But these organisms don't seem to be able to live off of pure chi or the pure prana or whatever you want to call it. They seem to need, not have that ability. They need an intermediate, they need a middleman to step down or transduce pure life energy into a form that they can metabolize. So it's as if they need us to ferment the pure life energy we're exposed to, turn it into a fuel that they can run off of, which seems to have a sort of metaphorical, if it is a metaphor, redder color temperature, like of, the baser human emotions like passion and anger and frustration and anxiety, like closer to what are called proto-emotions. They don't seem to be able to feed very well off of love and higher thinking. In fact, they seem to be allergic to those bluer energies, and people who possess a lot of those or are able to bring those up during a mind parasite attack, it seems to create an immunological effect and keep them away. But this is something that they may have in common. But just to close out your question, I think that they are coming from many different levels of reality, and so therefore that's the answer. The thing that's most not there, but that people in your audience are probably most frustrated that we're not talking about, so I'll just address it briefly, and that about which I have the least to say, is what to do about it if you're under attack. And because of my approach to the paranormal, I don't take a how-to approach, and I'm not a healer. So I don't know how to heal all instances of this, though many people, experiencers, have contacted me. But I'll just say that in general, a few things that I have found, in case this is helpful, is that a switch in diet, in physical diet, can be very helpful. And that parasites, and this is true sometimes for biological parasites, like if you have candida, it will want you to eat sugary foods because that's what it can live off of. And the mind parasites or energy parasites seem to prefer that we eat a hypercaloric diet with a lot of like stimulating foods and like excess sugar and things like that, because now we're kind of glowing with that redder color temperature that they can feed off of. And they seem to be very adverse to when people are eating a sort of hypometabolic diet, something to be closer to in Ayurveda, the Sattvic diet. Like if you're eating a diet of like mostly live foods or raw foods and things like that, then you're harder, your energetic profile shifts and you're harder to feed off of. Also, and I give an example of a mind parasite experience that I had and where that happened while I was sleeping, but then like my higher thinking awoke and like the bluer color temperature of the higher thinking and the awareness of what was going on seemed to frustrate and push the parasite away. So I think by being aware of it and aware of where we may be manipulated by it, that is part of the immunological defense. People can also create their own rituals. That's the idea of chaos magic, where you create your own banishing rituals of whatever sort or visualizations of various